It was just past 5 in the evening when the first strike tore through the silence. A sharp line of light streaked across the southern horizon, carving through the cloud line like a blade of white fire. Within seconds, the ground trembled, the kind of deep, resonant vibration that hums in the chest before the ears can even register the sound. Russia's $4.7 billion Southern Military District headquarters, once the nerve center of its entire Southern Command, was the first to feel the storm. Windows imploded inward. Concrete peeled off steel like wet bark. Flames rose from the motor pool before anyone understood what was happening. For months, Ukraine had prepared for this exact moment, a coordinated counteroffensive that fused air, sea, land, and cyber operations into a single synchronized pulse. From the outside, the attack looked like chaos. But every explosion, every missile, every jamming signal was timed to the second. At 5 p.m. sharp, the operation, known only by its encrypted code name, Stormwave, had been unleashed. In the air, 46 long-range kamikaze drones roared to life across 3 launch zones from Poltava to Mykolaiv. The first wave accelerated to Mach 0.85, skimming treetops at just under 200 feet, invisible to most radar arrays. Each carried a 90-kilogram shaped charge warhead designed to punch through reinforced bunkers before detonating. Cost roughly $250,000 per unit. Precision-built, camera-guided, and armed with AI flight correction that could dodge anti-air fire mid-path operators. In underground control bunkers watched the swarm glide across digital maps, small blue dots crossing the Dnipro River in perfect formation. One by one, encrypted telemetry confirmed target locks, then the feed turned to static. Impact, the first drone hit the western wall of the command complex in Taganrog. A bloom of orange erupted outward, hurling armored vehicles like toys. The secondary blast, likely from munitions inside, ripped open the entire structure. The shock wave rippled across the harbor. A corridor of destruction began. In less than 4 minutes, 12 Russian logistics hubs along the southern corridor were struck in near-perfect unison. Fuel depots ignited. Diesel reserves exploded in chain reactions that sent black columns of smoke spiraling thousands of feet into the evening sky. Cranes at the Taganrog port collapsed inward, flames licking their steel bones. For civilians miles away, it looked like a sunrise. Brilliant, silent, terrible. Windows shattered across the city. Glass cascaded from buildings like glittering rain. Inside the command complex, alarms blared through plumes of dust and smoke. Russian officers stumbled through corridors darkened by power loss. Communication screens flashed, then went black. Satellite uplinks failed. Their command network, one of the most expensive and secure systems in Russia's arsenal, was paralyzed in under 7 minutes. And this was only the first layer. Far above the chaos, a second, invisible weapon was already at work. Ukraine's cyber warfare units, operating under the call sign Perun's Hand, had infiltrated the base's unsecured data channels days before the strike. The instant the first explosions hit, the malware activated, freezing communications, looping security footage, and corrupting the command database. Russian technicians tried to reboot the system, but found themselves staring at screens filled with cascading Ukrainian text. Silence is the first victory. The blackout extended across the entire southern network. Fiber lines melted. Power grids failed. By the time Moscow's central defense servers realized what had happened, 22 minutes had already passed. In warfare, 22 minutes is eternity. Inside Kiev's underground control center, operators watched as the real-time satellite feed showed expanding fire zones across Rostov, Belgorod, and Taganrog. Each strike registered with white-hot precision on infrared. Ammunition dumps vaporized, fuel pipelines split open, and vehicle columns scattered in confusion. In the air, additional drones switched to adaptive mode, performing evasive zigzag flight patterns once Russian jammers went active. They used terrain data stored in onboard memory, weaving between radar pings with chilling precision. A young Ukrainian operator, his voice steady but trembling with adrenaline, whispered into the comms, "Wave 1 complete. Beginning transition." Behind him, digital clocks counted down the next phase, land-based missile support and artillery diversion. Ukraine's mobile HIMARS batteries, hidden under camouflage nets near Zaporizhzhia, received synchronized coordinates. The order went out. 5 seconds later, 6 rockets arced skyward, disappearing into the dusk. By now, Russia had begun to react. At Engels Air Base deep within Russian territory, a klaxon screamed. 20 MiG-31 interceptors roared down the runway, their engines leaving trails of molten light. Each carried two R-37M long-range missiles, Mach 6 capable 200-kilometer reach. Orders were brief and absolute: intercept and annihilate the incoming swarm. In Belgorod, S-400 launchers spun on their turrets, radars sweeping the sky. The operators, sweating under flickering fluorescent lights, locked onto moving targets, fast, low, and erratic. The first missile launch illuminated the entire horizon, a streak of orange and blue. Within seconds, 4 Ukrainian drones were vaporized mid-air, exploding into clouds of burning debris. But for every one destroyed, 3 slipped through. Russian artillery crews scrambled to strike back. In Kursk, batteries opened fire across the border toward Sumy and Kharkiv, launching shells at suspected drone depots. Each impact echoed through the twilight, sending geysers of dirt and concrete skyward. Yet when reconnaissance drones later surveyed the impact sites, they found only inflatable decoys and smoldering camouflage nets. Ukraine had baited them perfectly. 70% of Russia's retaliatory fire had hit empty ground, but Ukraine knew the counterstrike would escalate. Their radars detected something faster, hotter, deadlier, a hypersonic missile launch signature. At 5:16 p.m., deep inside the Saratov region, a Kinzhal missile ignited. Traveling at Mach 10, it screamed through the stratosphere towards central Ukraine. Its warhead, 480 kilograms of high-density fragmentation, could erase an entire district in seconds. NATO's early warning systems picked it up instantly. In Poland's Rzeszów base, radar operators watched a glowing arc streak across their screens. They relayed the alert to Kyiv. Kinzhal inbound. Impact window, under 5 minutes. Ukraine's Sky Shield batteries pivoted, tracking the invisible threat. The Patriot PAC-3 system, hidden under reinforced plating near Kyiv, whirred to life. Within 3.7 seconds, the computer calculated trajectory and interception timing. Target locked. The launch order came. A column of fire erupted from the launcher. The interceptor accelerated to Mach 5.7, slicing into the upper atmosphere. The operators watched 2 blips merge on their monitors. Then, flash. A radiant sphere bloomed against the evening clouds, followed by a shockwave that rolled across the capital like distant thunder. The Kinzhal disintegrated 30 kilometers above ground. Inside the control bunker, a few operators clapped, but no one celebrated. They knew the war was far from over. Even before the debris from the interception fell, new alerts flared across Ukraine's tactical network. Sevastopol, naval movement detected. Satellite feeds confirmed it, a formation of Russian Black Sea vessels shifting position. The Admiral Essen, Admiral Makarov, and 2 missile corvettes began maneuvering out of port, preparing to retaliate. Kyiv's command authorized the second wave. 6 naval drones, each roughly 5.5 meters long, were already waiting 40 nautical miles offshore. Powered by high-thrust jet engines, they could reach speeds up to 50 knots, low, fast, almost invisible on radar. Their payload, 200 kilograms of TNT reinforced with tungsten shrapnel. Their cost, roughly $450,000 each, expensive, but far cheaper than the frigates they were about to face. At 5:23 p.m., they accelerated, cutting across the waterline like black arrows. Foam and salt sprayed behind them. The sea was calm, the sun dipping low, perfect conditions for a kill run. At the same moment, Ukraine's cyber units executed the next step, jamming every surveillance camera in Sevastopol harbor. Russian monitors filled with static. Automated targeting systems rebooted repeatedly. Operators in the control towers shouted over radios that no visual feed was available. They were blind. The first naval drone breached the harbor at 5:25 p.m. Russian guards on the piers opened fire with heavy machine guns, their tracers stitching the surface of the water, but the drones kept coming. One bullet-scarred craft veered slightly, corrected itself, then rammed straight into the side of the Admiral Essen. The detonation thundered through the bay. A fountain of seawater and flame shot skyward. The shockwave shattered windows across the city. The frigate's radar dome sheared off, rolling into the water. Alarms echoed through every deck. Within minutes, a second and third explosion followed, one hitting a patrol boat, another detonating near a supply barge. As fire crews rushed to contain the inferno, Ukrainian operators watched through drone feeds as the Admiral Essen began to list to port, its hull breached. Burning oil snaked across the water's surface, painting it in ribbons of orange and black. By now, the sky above the Black Sea had turned a haunting violet, sunset meeting smoke. The first phase of the counterattack had crippled one of Russia's most secure headquarters and gutted part of its naval pride in less than an hour, but the operation wasn't finished. Not yet. In Kiev's dim-lit war room, the commander removed his headset, eyes fixed on the live satellite feed of the burning bay. "We've taken their sight," he said quietly. "Now we take their silence." And somewhere on the horizon, engines whispered again, preparing the world for what would come next. The sea boiled with fire and oil. Smoke from the Admiral Essen curled skyward, thick as ink. Across the bay, alarm sirens wailed in chaotic harmony, echoing off the cliffs of Sevastopol. Russian sailors scrambled across decks, slick with burning fuel, dragging hoses, shouting over the roar of the blaze. Commanders barked orders through radios that gave only static. Above it all, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones circled like hawks, capturing every frame. Their feeds streamed back to Kiev, thermal maps of the chaos, real-time visuals of explosions rippling through the harbor. Every detonation was logged, analyzed, and marked for post-strike assessment. In Moscow, analysts watched the same feeds via intercepted NATO relays. For the first time in the war, the Russian Southern Command had gone completely dark. No live communication. No chain of control. Their $4.7 billion headquarters flattened. Their naval communications cut. And their ships burning. At 5:31 p.m., Russia initiated Operation Iron Echo, a retaliatory strike intended to overwhelm Ukraine's command infrastructure through saturation and confusion. MiG-31s, Tu-95 bombers, and Iskander ground launchers went active across 3 time zones. The order: fire everything capable of flight. The night sky lit up with contrails and sonic cracks. From the Belgorod region, 12 Iskander-M ballistic missiles launched in sequence, each traveling at Mach 6, carrying a 700-kilogram warhead. Simultaneously, Tu-95 bombers climbed to 35,000 feet, releasing volleys of Kh-101 cruise missiles. From Kaluga to Crimea, launch plumes stretched across the horizon like fiery ropes. Kiev's air defense network sprang into motion. Patriot, Iris-T, and NASAMS batteries lit up radar grids. Operators monitored screens filled with hundreds of moving points, enemy missiles, decoys, drones. A ballet of destruction had begun. The first impact came at 5:36 p.m. near Dnipro. A Ukrainian warehouse storing spare drone engines exploded, the shockwave flattening nearby hangars. Seconds later, another missile slammed into a power substation outside Zaporizhzhia. Sparks burst into the sky, severing electricity across an entire district, but not all the strikes landed. Dozens were intercepted mid-flight, fiery blossoms of success in the dark. Ukraine's air defense missiles arced upward, their trails glowing against the clouds. Over Kyiv, one Patriot unit scored 3 consecutive kills in under 2 minutes, each hit producing a blinding flash and thunderous crack that shook the capital's windows. Then, at 5:41 p.m., the second Kinjal appeared. Radar signatures confirmed it. A single hypersonic missile streaking toward western Ukraine at Mach 10. The estimated impact zone, Lviv. For civilians in the city, the warning sirens gave barely 90 seconds. Streets emptied, lights went out. In a bunker beneath the central square, operators tracked the projectile closing in. At 5:43 p.m., NATO's early warning systems relayed telemetry data to Ukrainian command. Once again, a Patriot PAC-3 unit engaged. The interception window was brutally short, 4 seconds. The interceptor launched, ascending in a blinding trail. 2 glowing dots merged on radar, then vanished. The feed turned white. Observers in Lviv saw it as a sudden burst of daylight, a flash that turned the night to noon. The shockwave followed like a hammer blow, rattling every window for miles. The missile disintegrated in the upper atmosphere, fragments raining harmlessly into distant fields. Ukraine had done it again, defying one of Russia's most feared weapons. But before relief could set in, new data began streaming in from the Black Sea, Sevastopol under renewed assault. Only this time, it wasn't Ukrainian fire. It was Russian retaliation. 3 Russian Kaliber cruise missiles, launched from submarines, raced toward Odessa at Mach 0.8. Each carried a 500 key fragmentation warhead. The first struck near the coast, blasting a crater into an industrial site. The second veered off course after jamming interference. The third was intercepted at sea, torn apart by an RIM-7 missile fired from a Ukrainian patrol vessel. The air smelled of burning fuel and salt. For a moment it seemed both sides were fighting ghosts, missiles chasing decoys, drones diving into wreckage, artillery shells hitting positions long abandoned. Then Ukraine's command made a decisive move. A message went out across secure networks, short and cryptic. Phase 3, Ghost Swarm. From a disguised van on the outskirts of Dnipro, a hatch slid open. 40 microdrones, each no larger than a seagull, lifted into the air. Their wings shimmered under starlight, made of lightweight polymer printed with reflective camouflage patterns. Each carried a 2-kilogram directed charge explosive in its nose, linked through a swarm AI module. They rose silently, forming a spiral before splitting into 5 coordinated groups. Their flight paths wove through valleys, over rivers, beneath radar. Traveling at 120 km/h, they hugged the terrain, whispering like wind. Their mission: infiltrate Sevastopol harbor and finish what the first strike had begun. At 5:55 p.m., the swarm crossed the coastline. Russian searchlights swept the sky, catching only smoke and drifting ash. The microdrones slipped through the chaos, entering the skeletal remains of the Admiral Essen. Inside, sensors detected heat signatures, crew still fighting fires, engineers attempting to restart systems. The swarm's onboard processors locked onto these readings, assigning targets autonomously. The first detonation came from within the ship's ventilation shaft, then another from the lower deck. Within 30 seconds, 8 micro-explosions tore through the vessel's hull, splitting it in half. The harbor erupted again, flames reaching higher than the masts. For onlookers, the scene was apocalyptic. Flaming debris drifted across the bay like dying meteors. Oil slicks caught fire, spreading molten ribbons across the waves. The sea itself seemed to burn. Russia's remaining ships began retreating toward deeper waters, firing flares and anti-drone rounds. But the swarm adapted, splitting, diving, reforming in seconds. One group hit a radar barge. Another infiltrated a dry dock. Within minutes, 2 more explosions echoed through Sevastopol's industrial quarter. The final drone's feed transmitted until impact. A shaky view of a Russian flag fluttering through smoke, then static. By 6:04 p.m., Sevastopol's harbor had fallen silent. The radar grid was down. Communication lines severed. Russian naval power in the region, crippled. In Kiev, the war room glowed with soft blue light. Screens showed red blips fading one by one. The operation was nearing completion. Officers reported in clipped voices, all objectives neutralized, minimal losses. Ghost Swarm terminated. Ukraine had struck the heart of Russia's southern command, crippled its naval presence, and paralyzed its communications, all within a single evening. But even amid triumph, the mood was heavy. No one cheered. They had seen too many fires, heard too many screams through live feeds. In another monitor, a camera aboard a Ukrainian rescue ship showed Russian sailors being pulled from the sea, burned, exhausted, shivering. Kiev's command ordered all captives treated according to the Geneva Convention. Field medics gave water, blankets, morphine. One young medic was heard saying quietly, "They fought because they were told to, just like us." As the smoke over Sevastopol thinned, dawn began to touch the horizon. The aftermath was haunting. Ships half-sunken, cranes bent over like broken spines, seawater glinting with fuel. Birds circled overhead, confused by the heat rising from the ruins. Satellite imagery later showed the scale. Dozens of destroyed vehicles, collapsed buildings, and 2 frigates crippled beyond repair. Russian state media tried to frame it as a minor incident, but the loss of their $4.7 billion command center and key naval assets spoke louder than any statement, so Ukraine had demonstrated something larger than firepower. It had revealed the blueprint of modern war, precision, data, and autonomy working together like a single living organism. In the West, analysts dubbed it the algorithmic offensive. In Moscow, officials called emergency meetings to review cyber vulnerabilities. And in Kiev, the commander of the operation gave his only statement to the press that night. "We don't celebrate destruction. We celebrate precision, because the fewer mistakes we make, the fewer lives are lost." The word spread across global headlines within hours. That night, a quiet realization settled across military think tanks and intelligence circles. The age of tanks and trenches was fading. The new war was fought by code, algorithms, and machines small enough to fit in a soldier's backpack. As the final fires in Sevastopol burned out, the last Ukrainian drone returned to base, scarred, low on battery, its camera lens cracked. Operators watched its feed fade to black, then powered down their consoles. Silence filled the bunker. The war would continue tomorrow, perhaps for years, but tonight, They had changed the equation. Above the Black Sea, the smoke drifted eastward, carrying with it the memory of precision, defiance, and the cost of freedom. Ukraine's counterattack had shattered more than steel. It had fractured the illusion of invincibility, and in that fragile calm after the storm, one truth echoed through every command post, every radar room, every silent screen: the future of warfare had just arrived.